Did you know that a higher IQ can actually increase your capacity to make mistakes? You can become blind to interpreting the data in front of you if it proves you wrong. Why? Well, all people are reasoning machines. And most of that reasoning goes into just explaining the world in a way that makes us seem correct. So that we are just logical in our own brains and we're people that just wander the world in complete bliss and doing things right. But if you have higher reasoning abilities, that means you can trick yourself more elegantly when the world is trying to tell you that you're wrong. So, hello and welcome to the Growth Mindset Podcast. Today we're talking about the ego, we're talking about cognitive biases, and how we can become more right and stop being idiots. Now, as I was saying, higher intelligence will increase your likelihood in general over life to be correct. But that in turn develops an expectation that you will be correct. And this can lead to stubbornness because you will often correctly assume that you are right when you're talking to other people because you think you're smarter than them. And when you're being told that you're wrong by other people that haven't actually grasped half of the information that you've already processed, it's a tedious thing that you're used to and that you're just expecting to be right. But this greater power to understand things will lead to often greater misunderstandings of things if you let your ego take hold of you, because as soon as the ego gets involved, that's when you need to be worried. If you see a contradictory idea or evidence that offers you valuable insights, it can be easily wasted. And your strong creativity and reasoning skills will quickly explain this information in a beautiful package that fits what you want to believe rather than what is true. And that can inhibit your long-term improvement, that can impair your growth mindset. And even if you're someone who thinks you really like to improve and that you're always working really hard, you're probably only working on the things that you think you need to improve and not that you actually need to improve. You might be reading some of the best information out there, but you won't be gaining any of the wisdom because you won't let it challenge your own thinking. As Stephen Bartlett says, you can read many books, but they're wasted if you can't read yourself. So, okay, how about you? Do you think you're kind of smart, or are you aware that you're not that capable? It's easy to listen to what I've said so far and think that the people I'm talking about are just idiots, those smart asses. They are definitely not like you at all. They are stubborn and don't listen to facts, but you, of course, like to interpret facts as you see them and learn from whatever's there. But then what about Edison or Steve Jobs? We revere their stubbornness despite overwhelming common belief against them. And when we think about that, it's easy to attribute our own occasional stubbornness, which perhaps does exist after all, to the currently uncommon knowledge that we're actually a genius because, actually we are really smart. So now let's work out if you are actually a genius. How good are you really at understanding information that's being presented to you? So you listen to me tell you that smart people do not always interpret new information correctly. They'll often explain it to their own advantage. So when I told you that, did that information get interpreted in a way that says, you know what, you are self-aware enough to not make that mistake yourself? You might assume that you're not one of those silly people who ignore or misinterpret new insights, and you might quickly group all of those close-minded individuals as people that you have nothing in common with. So mentally distancing yourself away from these people that you don't want to be like. Well, that means your creative reasoning, your ability to interpret data has efficiently explained the information that I just gave you in a way that fits seamlessly into how you think about yourself. It explained that information in a way that says that you are great, there's nothing to challenge you in what I'm telling you, you became aware that there are more idiots in the world, but you're definitely still wonderful and not one of them. That's how you interpreted the information. Or alternatively, did you interpret the information in a different way? Did you listen to me saying that, and did you think honestly that you might make that error a lot, that it might apply to you? Did you think about some of the times that you were presented with evidence that you ignored and it turned out you were wrong and you should have listened to the evidence? And do you perhaps have 3 examples readily to hand that prove to you that you're often very wrong? And do you use those all the time to remind yourself to be humble? Well, if you did that, you have a lot of wisdom, you have a lot of self-awareness to hear new ideas and conceptualize how they really might apply to you rather than how you want them to apply to you. Your ego doesn't jump in to save you. You're radically open to new ideas and opportunities to learn, and you have a major growth mindset because you're just highly aware that you aren't perfect yet, and you know that you're making dumb mistakes every day because you're a human, and you just see any opportunity that's out there to learn and lean into improvement, even if that means admitting to yourself you're currently flawed. And that is an amazing thing that you just did. And I'm pretty sure most of you didn't just do it because it's really hard. Because we all have an ego, and it's very slippery. If you are as wise as you think you are, you would be highly aware of your personal flaws. You wouldn't interpret new information in a way that protects the knowledge that you feel you're a sensible human. Because we all want to be sensible humans. We'd actually be seeking the opportunities that are out there to be wrong, and we'd get excited by any time we think we might be wrong. We'd encourage to hang out with people that prove to us we're wrong all the time. And wise people always love to learn, even if it means that they're currently wrong right now. An unconscious bias is a slippery beast because it is unconscious. That means you can't think about it or see it as it happens. And if you knew you were making mistakes as you were doing them, you wouldn't be doing it. So logically, it's kind of impossible to see a mistake that we're making as we make it because we wouldn't be making it. We can only learn from these mistakes through very open self-reflection and listening to others when they tell us that we're wrong. So anyone who thinks they don't have unconscious biases is already lost because we have them all the time. And they will live a life of being ruled by their biases because they don't have any awareness that they have them. Your ego is so efficient and fast because we don't have time to be aware of it. It's there to protect us. It's evolved to give us confidence instead of questions. So firstly, we have to accept that we are mostly wrong, and only then do we have the chance of being right. How can you unbias yourself? Like I said, do you have 3 examples of when you were very ignorant and stupid and ignored information? And no judgment here, because as I said, it's really hard to notice yourself doing this. And 99% of the mistakes you make every day won't be accessible to you. So just try and write 3 of them down. And if you're struggling, ask a friend and they'll probably give you 10 straight away. That's life. You can probably do it for your friends. Once you've done that, feel free to add them in some comments or send me an email, and I would love to read them because that will help you remember them. Another option would be to tell the world, put them on LinkedIn or a tweet or an Instagram post, because everyone loves hearing an honest tale of your failures and mistakes, and it might be one of the best posts you ever write. Okay, now as I've just said that as a piece of advice to you, I couldn't say that without then doing it myself. I am a human. I, of course, make mistakes all the time. I'm going to show you some of the big ones I've made across my adult life from when I was 20, just starting my first business, to last year. I'm not going to be listing mistakes every year. I'm just going to give you 3, like I said. So my first mistake was being a very unscientific scientist. This was in 2012 in the final year of my degree and the second year of running my first business. This mistake really changed how I think about the world, my life, and everything. I was writing my mini thesis, and I felt like I'd weighed up all the evidence on both sides of this scientific argument. It was the impact of soya and phytoestrogens on bone health. And I delivered my review, and the fact that people in Asia have been eating soya since forever without the men turning into women or any real bad impacts kind of made me look down on the anti-soy arguments. Also, I was specifically looking into the impacts on post-menopausal women with osteoporosis, which is something that directly affects my mother. So I was slightly more threatened by anyone making up scientific claims that might reduce her health or weren't true. So I really overworked in this area, and it interested me for some reason, and I was super proud of my submission. And also, I knew that I was right with what I'd stated. But my professor marked me down, and I didn't get a first, which I've really thought I deserved on this because I had been biased. I had quickly worked out what I wanted to prove, and I then stopped listening to the data in a really open way. The idea that my bias had then led me to quickly draw conclusions that could have harmed my mother was really shocking. I'm someone who, as a child, had like science scholarships, and I'd used to been understanding stuff from teachers before they'd even finished explaining, and like I have a high IQ and I was running a successful business at the same time as doing a degree. It just led me to realize that it's really easy to get carried away if you have a hunch, and your high IQ means absolutely nothing if you don't know how to apply it. The amazing power of your brain can be completely wasted if you just mess up the first step and if you don't let it work on the things it actually needs to work on understanding. Having that experience also helped me understand how much content out there is actually just people proving their own point rather than seeking the answer. This is from scientific literature, published papers, to social media and the news. So many people don't even realize they have an agenda. I learned to question the things that I create and think about why. I also understood how important it is to question what I read and watch or listen to, whilst also asking why it was created in the first place and what the creator was trying to achieve when they did it, and if there was any agenda or hidden agenda in doing it. Because I can't even recognize my own mistakes, so I can hardly expect others to recognize theirs. I certainly shouldn't let myself become opinionated by reading or listening or watching biased opinions of others, as well as the factors learning that I am an idiot. Okay, that was my first big mistake. And now on to my second mistake. This was 2016-17, where I was a very unbalanced balancer. What do I mean by that? Well, I've always been focused on being fair. It might be my love of physics and the conservation of energy and inputs and outputs where everything can be balanced in an equal way because there is always conservation of energy. Perhaps also the fact that I'm a Libra maybe means something because Libras are supposed to be equal and fair and balanced stuff. Because of this, I was always good with money. I always knew how much I needed to have to be able to do the things that I wanted to do. And it became pretty easy for me to balance what I needed to have, and it became pretty easy for me to balance what I needed to do to have the money that I wanted to do the things that I want. That also led to me often lending money to friends because I always had money. And I ended up developing a habit of tracking things that people owed me. And this was before Splitwise existed. And so when I went traveling for a year with a friend across Asia, I may have been a little over the top on tracking everything from my side and always knowing what he owed me. We were often relying on each other for different things, like a beer here, a bus there, a hostel, a camel ride, breakfast, etc. And he was quite relaxed. He was happy to do things for me without really tracking them and having it all work out. And I was not used to swapping money with people without it adding up. And he kept track of the big things, sure, but he didn't have the time to look at smaller stuff. I kind of became annoyed at all the things that he didn't pay me back for without really being aware of the things that he might have been doing. Also, at the same time, we were working together doing some contracting and earning way more money than you would expect some backpackers on a shoestring bumming around Asia to be earning. And I just became kind of frustrated. Despite the fact that we had good incomes and he was helping me with my income, I did just often become frustrated and would sometimes be passive aggressive in the odd moment or complaining about him not being kind. And we had a few arguments, but I totally felt like he was being a bit of a melon. It was towards the end of that year that I took a 10-day Vipassana retreat, which is a 10 days of silent meditating, and it's an inwards journey for yourself of self-reflection. And it's only with such an extended period of silence that you can really peel away the layers of your ego and actually really reflect on who you are and how you are, and actually look at yourself without always interpreting the thing that you're doing as the correct thing. And by peeling away some of the layers of my mind, I was actually able to glimpse the reality of my situation with my friend that I was traveling with. During our travels, I was totally unaware of half of the information in front of me, because he was the one being kind all the time, and I was the one starting battles that didn't need to be fought. I was getting annoyed over a few dollars, whilst he was helping me to earn thousands, and all the frustration and problems were entirely started by me. They were only started because I was trying to be fair, but instead I was blaming him for headaches that I was creating. I was being a massive melon. And that's a really good example of how much of an idiot I was. There you go. That was my second big mistake. All right. Now, coming up to some more recent things. Mistake number 3, being an unentrepreneurial entrepreneur. This was 2020, 2021, maybe a bit of 2022. A fallacy that many entrepreneurs dive straight into is falling in love with their solution rather than the actual problem. And my last business was started as an idea for a problem that I thought I had, connecting with others over podcasts. I spend so much time listening to podcasts, learning alone, and with my growth mindset, of course, I just love learning from other people and seeing what they're listening to as well and how they're interpreting what they're doing. And I wished others could share their learnings with me and that I could share my learnings with others. I just wanted to be inspired by things that people were doing. And I was like, an app that lets you see what everyone does, everyone listens to, where you can add comments and share clips is what I need in my life, and it's what everybody else needs. And it was COVID lockdown and a perfect solution to connecting remotely with people without using the comparative social media. You can just geek out with your mates. And I got convinced even further by Techstars backing me, which gave us validation from a respected business accelerator and money. And I was attracted to the dream of running a scalable tech business. Now, what I missed was the fact that there were some similar solutions already out there that weren't interesting to me. Possibly because none of my friends were on them, I reasoned that it must be that I needed to create a better solution that would have enough people on it for it to work. Even though I'd never felt the urge to invite any of my friends to join those other apps, I was also in a WhatsApp group for sharing great podcasts with other people, and the members there weren't that interested in using the idea of my app, but I still thought it should be done. And you may remember when Clubhouse came out, there was a flurry of live social audio apps, and my co-founders at the business wanted to pivot our company to the user-generated audio clips thing, and there was a whole wave of startups that started doing this. And it was easy for me, who didn't like this idea, to see that my co-founders didn't want to use the other apps that are exactly like our potential new idea. And I could see that easily because I didn't like the idea from the start. Yet I wasn't seeing the same problem I had with myself for my idea, because I was just convinced that at scale, it would make lots of sense and that an ecosystem could exist that would be better for the listener and the podcaster. A part of me is still kind of right, which makes it even harder. But the fact that customers just didn't want to join it, this fact was staring me in the face from day one of the idea, and real user feedback and poor retention continued to be a problem that we ignored as we grew. It took another Vipassana retreat and possibly also some LSD to actually get my head out of my ass, or just out of everything, to see that the solution that I was working on was a solution that I wanted and wasn't solving the real problem. And it wasn't what the market needed. I realized that it was an opinion that had been given to me by society and all the bloody podcasts that I listened to, and watching the reality of so many of my friends and peers having a really horrible, stressful life, being a tech founder wasn't so appealing. And that also helped me realize what I was doing was maybe just making me unhappy rather than solving any problems for anyone. I've been a pretty successful guy up to now, doing my own thing, having the freedom that I've relished to just have adventures when I feel like it, and the responsibility of having millions of pounds from investors and lots of employees, and having to show up regularly on schedule and do lots of work all the time might not actually be the thing that I really wanted to do at the moment. I'm sure it could be part of my future, certainly for a cause that I believe in and love, but it helped me realize that what I was doing was being in love with my problem and not really being aware of the data in front of me. So eventually, yes, we pivoted that business and redefined my role so they both became things that could make sense. But if I had been more humble from the start and more in love with the real problem that I was solving instead of the solution that I wanted to use to solve it, things could have gone very differently. So those are my 3 big mistakes and pretty massive things to be doing for someone who's supposed to know what they're doing with their life and runs a podcast around how to be more aware of what you're doing and doing it better. But that's life, and why ego is such an important thing to realize that we have. And so I'd love to give some more tips on how to become an ego detective, because our ego is forever falling into traps. The world is basically a giant infestation of ego traps, and it's only getting worse with social media and all these other tools we have. Now, I like to pride myself on not making mistakes twice. Although I might not make the same specific mistake, it does appear that the wider mistake of falling foul of my ego has been the real mistake that I just keep on making time and time again. And it took some really hard moments of awareness to notice those mistakes, to rewire my brain, to stop interpreting myself as doing the right thing and actually be like, hey Sam, you're an idiot. This isn't right. You need to do something different and actually grow. And the ego is so deceptive that the reality of our errors can hide out of sight our whole lives. It took going on 10-day silent meditation retreats or using LSD, which are very powerful tools to help you lose your ego, for me to actually become aware. And honestly, although they are so good, most people aren't going to try them. The world would be a much better place if they did, but that's just the facts of life. So, what else can you do besides some massive things like that? Well, step 1, as I've already mentioned, try writing down 3 big errors that you have made and try to keep hold of them and remember them to remind you when you're doing things that you can mess up. And this is one of those things that once you realize how self-deception happens and you stop taking yourself so seriously, you can start to appreciate the extent to which it occurs, because it's like spotting ants. After you find 1 or 2, suddenly you'll realize there's an entire nest of them and they're everywhere. So you can start easy, like those times where you say you'll watch 1 episode on Netflix and you'll say it with a sense of purpose. You've got stuff to do, you're organized, you're going to give yourself a little treat. But actually, if you look back at the entire data of your life, you'll always end up watching 3 and going to bed too late. Small things like that you do, and try and find some things that really do humble you and bring you back down and take the edges off your ego. And then what other things? So there are some nurturing strategies to help you. So like journaling, meditation, reflective time such as exercise or just menial activities where you can just think. Those are really good. There's a reason they're spoken about so much on podcasts and YouTube by the self-improvement community, because it covers the bases by just helping you see the data in front of you so that you have better chance of actually interpreting it. But the depth to which these strategies can go will be limited, of course, by your own awareness. So you might be listing things that you're doing and, of course, thinking that you're doing them correctly or wondering why they aren't working, as opposed to seeing the reality, which is a problem. Try and go further by listing all the assumptions that you're making when you're doing activities and try to explore the opposite ideas of those assumptions. Now, that sounds very easy to do, but actually it's very hard. And you really have to write this down, or even better, practice it with a coach or a therapist. Conveniently, we're sponsored by therapists today, but a coach is fine, or whatever you choose. Personally, therapy for me is a very good option to get that kick started, and just having someone question why you think what you're doing is correct and letting you see the other side of your ego, the other side of your assumptions and your self-deception to become more aware. And then finally, the other strategy is hanging out with people that you feel are very highly aware of their egos. Because when you realize that they are way happier and calmer than you might start nurturing some healthy aspirations. You are the result of the 5 people that you hang around. If you are aware of some of your friends in your circles that are really good at this, make a point to hang out with them more. And maybe you'll start to develop an ego around having no ego, because it's something good to aspire to. And that is it. Everything I had to tell to you today. It's a really hard concept to really wrap your head around, But it's so powerful, and one of the biggest things that I think anyone should learn if you're ever going to reach those later stages of maturity and awareness and wisdom. So thank you for listening. If you think this would be relevant for anyone that you know, do please send it to them, and please give me a good rating so that my mum will let me carry on not having a real job, because I quite like not having a real job at the moment and doing my thing. And remember that if you want to enjoy your life, that does start with enjoying today. So be kind to yourself, and whilst you're at it, be kind to someone else. Thanks for listening.